They call the Himalayas the roof of the world, a vast wall of ice and stone that was once believed to separate civilizations. But today, that same mountain range has become something else entirely. Not a barrier, but a battleground. Stretching across thousands of kilometers, the Himalayas are now lined with soldiers, roads, airstrips, and unresolved borders, where some of the world's most powerful nations quietly test each other's limits. In this video, we do a dive into a series of crazy geopolitics constantly at play within the HIPs. The first geopolitical conflict lies in the Siachen Glacier, a place often described as the highest battlefield on Earth. At first glance, it is an unlikely site for conflict. Yet this is where one of the most enduring and strategically complex confrontations between India and Pakistan continues to unfold. To understand why, you have to go back to a line that was never fully drawn. In 1949, following the First Indo-Pak War, the Karachi Agreement of 1949 established a ceasefire line in Jammu and Kashmir. But that line stopped at a grid reference known as NJ9842. Beyond that point, the agreement simply stated that the boundary would run north to the glaciers. It was a vague phrase, one that would later be interpreted in very different ways. India read it as a line that continued northward along the Saltoro Ridge, effectively placing the Siachen Glacier within its territory. Pakistan, on the other hand, drew a diagonal line from NJ9842 to the Karakoram Pass, placing the glacier on its side. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Pakistan had begun authorizing mountaineering expeditions into the glacier, reinforcing its claim through presence. But before it could translate that into military control, India moved first. In April 1984, India launched Operation Mehdood, an audacious high-altitude operation to occupy key positions alongside the Saltoro Ridge, which overlooks the glacier. By securing the ridge, Indian forces effectively gained the high ground, dominating the glacier below and blocking Pakistan's access through critical passes such as Siala, Bilafondla, and Gyongla. What followed was not a conventional war, but a prolonged deployment in one of the harshest environments on Earth. India says that without its presence in the Siachen, Pakistan would have access to the glacier through the various passes in the Saltoro Ridge. That would ensure Pakistan's direct access to China, provide a bridge to the occupied northern areas as well as to the Chinese-occupied Aksai Chin. India also goes on to say that its deployment here enables them to monitor Gilgit-Baltistan, and that its northernmost position at Indira Kol denies Pakistan access to the Karakoram Pass. So, what emerges at Siachen is not just a frozen conflict between two countries, it is a strategic triangle, where India, Pakistan, and China intersect. To the southeast of Siachen, there is another critical frontier, that is the Valley of Galwan. The Galwan Valley, located in the high-altitude desert of eastern Ladakh, is a strategically vital region situated near the line of actual control. It sits at approximately 15,000 feet. For years, it was one of the quieter stretches of this disputed frontier, but that changed as infrastructure began to reshape the balance on the ground. At the center of this shift is a strategic road network built by India, most notably the Dalbuk-Shok Dowlad Beg Oldi Road, often referred to as the DS-DBO Road. Stretching hundreds of kilometers through some of the harshest terrain on Earth, it connects India's interior positions in Ladakh to the remote forward post of Dowlad Beg Oldi, home to one of the world's highest airstrips. Reactivated and upgraded in recent years, this airbase, along with the road leading to it, significantly enhances India's ability to move troops, equipment, and supplies quickly to the northernmost edges of the frontier, particularly near the Karakoram Pass. From India's perspective, this infrastructure is essential. It reduces response times, strengthens logistical resilience, and closes long-standing gaps in connectivity along a vulnerable stretch of the LAC. But from the viewpoint of China, these developments raise concerns.
China does not recognize the so-called Central Territory of Ladakh illegally established by India, We also oppose the construction of infrastructure for the purpose of military control in the disputed border areas.
It was against this backdrop that tensions escalated in 2020. Patrols from both sides began encountering each other more frequently in the Galwan area. The situation spiraled when Indian troops reported that Chinese forces had set up tents and observation structures in what India considered its side of the line. In response, Indian soldiers dismantled and burned these positions during a patrol. What followed was a rapid escalation. Bound by long-standing agreements that restrict the use of firearms along the frontier, both sides confronted each other with improvised weapons: stones, clubs, and rods. In a brutal clash involving hundreds of troops, soldiers fought hand-to-hand in freezing temperatures and near vertical terrain. When it ended, at least 20 Indian soldiers had been killed, along with an undisclosed number on the Chinese side. It was the deadliest confrontation between the two countries in decades, and a stark reminder that even in the absence of gunfire, the Himalayas can still erupt into violence. The aftermath extended far beyond the valley itself. India responded by tightening scrutiny on Chinese investments, restricting certain economic engagements, and banning several Chinese mobile applications. Military deployments surged on both sides, with additional troops, armor, and artillery moving into forward positions across eastern Ladakh. And yet, Galwan is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Because further east, along another ridge where three nations meet, a similar story has already played out. One that began not with a clash, but with the construction of a single road. We're talking about the region of the Doklam Plateau. Perched along the edge of the Chumbi Valley, Doklam sits at a critical junction between China, Bhutan, and India. On a map, it may appear as just another patch of high-altitude terrain, but its significance lies in what it overlooks. Just to the south lies the narrow Siliguri Corridor, India's only land link to its northeastern states, including Arunachal Pradesh. In strategic terms, this corridor is a lifeline, and Doklam sits like a vantage point above it. China's claim over Doklam is rooted in the Convention of Calcutta 1890, which it interprets as placing the boundary further south at Mount Gitmuchi. Bhutan disputes this, arguing that it was never a party to that agreement and maintains that the boundary lies further north near Vatangla, placing Doklam within its territory. India in turn supports Bhutan's position both diplomatically and strategically. But as in Galwan, it is infrastructure that turned this dispute into confrontation. China has steadily expanded its footprint in the region, building roads and improving connectivity from Lhasa down through the Chumbi Valley to Yadong. From China's perspective, this is about strengthening connectivity, logistics, and long-term strategic mobility across Tibet. But from India's perspective, the same developments raise a different concern. Because if these roads were to extend southward through Doklam, they would bring Chinese forces closer to the Siliguri Corridor, compressing India's defensive depth and potentially giving China a position from which it could threaten to cut off India's northeast in a conflict. This concern came to a head in 2017, when Chinese engineers attempted to extend a road into the Doklam Plateau. Bhutan formally protested. India then intervened, sending troops to block the construction, arguing that the move would alter the status quo and threaten its strategic interests. What followed was a tense 73-day standoff, with soldiers from both sides positioned just meters apart on the plateau. Chinese officials say that in opposing the road construction, Indian border guards obstructed normal activities on the Chinese side and called on India to immediately withdraw for peace to prevail. As this journey across the Himalayas draws to a close, it brings us to one final frontier, one where geopolitics is no longer driven by terrain or infrastructure alone, but by religion. In the eastern Himalayas lies Tawang, a region that sits at the center of one of the most complex and deeply layered disputes between India and China. Unlike Ladakh or Doklam, where roads and ridgelines dominate the conversation, Tawang introduces a new dimension: religion, identity, and historical legacy. Tawang is home to one of the largest Buddhist monasteries in the world, and it holds immense spiritual significance. Particularly within Tibetan Buddhism, it is also the birthplace of the 6th Dalai Lama, linking it directly to the religious lineage that continues today through the Dalai Lama, the 14th incarnation, who currently resides in India after fleeing Tibet in 1959. His escape route into India passed through Tawang, further embedding this region into the broader story of Tibet's political and spiritual struggle. China views Arunachal Pradesh as part of what it calls South Tibet, and it places particular emphasis on Tawang because of its religious importance. Control over Tawang would not only extend China's territorial reach, but also strengthen its influence over Tibetan Buddhism, especially in the context of the future succession of the Dalai Lama. There is also a deeper layer to China's position. Beijing has at times viewed regions like Siachen, a barren but strategically important area under its control, as a potential bargaining chip in a broader settlement with India. The idea, at least in theory, would be an exchange. That is, letting India have Siachen in return for India conceding Arunachal Pradesh to China. But for India, such a trade is unthinkable. Unlike Siachen, Arunachal Pradesh is not an empty plateau. It is a populated, culturally rich state deeply integrated into the Indian Union. So there you have it. From the icy expanse of Siachen Glacier to the tense ridgelines of Galwan Valley to the strategic plateau of Doklam, each region represents a different kind of conflict.